I call David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. That last speech is by somebody that is completely out of his depth in the finance area and should really just stick to being a lecturer in art history because that seems to be about his level. He would have no idea about purchasing a property. Probably half his caucus would have no idea about purchasing a property, and it was completely full of inaccuracies. And it misled the New Zealand public, and I'm going to put them straight now so that they know what is actually going on and don't listen to the waffle from the other side from somebody that has got no idea about finance, and everybody knows he's completely out of his depth, and he's doing it to take down Andrew Little to show how ineffective the Labor Party is. But putting that aside, in New Zealand, if somebody sells a property within 10 years, there is an intention test. And so just listen, as the member over there might want to just listen and learn. Now, the thing is, there's an intention test, and that test has a 10-year rule. And if someone buys or sells a property within 10 years, that person can be subject to tax on the profit on that sale. And there is the test around the intention at the time of purchase. Now, they're looking at this bill, we are clarifying that intention test and saying that if somebody buys and sells within 2 years without it being their main home, then they are automatically deemed to be of selling within a taxable range. And so it is no change to the existing rules. Speculators, as that member said, were exempt from this, is not true. That is not the case. Speculators are caught under the intention test. That is their very nature of their business. They are speculators. They buy and sell, speculating on property, therefore their intention is such, and therefore they are taxable. And some members on the other side need to listen about the rules around taxation and not put out to the public some inaccuracies around speculative rules around land sales. Now, if we look at what really that member was saying, he was saying that it could have been the beginning of something useful. And it was a political response, he called it. Well, I remember the Labor Party went into the last election with something they thought was useful, and that was a capital gains tax, a full-blooded capital gains tax. And that member wants that capital gains tax. He doesn't agree with their leader, and he's saying that it could have been the beginning of something useful. And that would have been the full-blown capital gains tax that the Labor Party went to the last election with, and subsequent to the last election, they have thrown out. They have decided that they are not going to do it because, one, it doesn't work, and two, the public don't want it. And the members opposite should not go around this country misleading New Zealanders and saying that this piece of legislation does not catch speculators because they are caught under the intention test already in reality. This legislation deems those purchases and sales within that first 2 years as being taxable. That's the effect of this legislation. Now, it is as an exemption for your main home, and everybody would want to see that exemption. Even if you had the full-blown capital gains tax that the Labor Party talked about, it would have an exemption for the main home. There are also exemptions for certain changes in circumstances. For example, a marriage breakup, something like that, that has not been anticipated. And so if there is the matrimonial property agreement, for example, comes into force, then this legislation would not affect that situation. So there are exemptions there, but they are for circumstances that would not be foreseen in the natural course of somebody's life and the intention of that person at the time when they purchased the home. So this is an important part of the suite of legislation that is looking at housing issues. It is an important part of sending a signal to New Zealanders around the treatment of housing tax gains and losses. And it is an important part of sending the right message out there, and it should not be used by the opposition in this parliament for political gain. It should not be used by the opposition to mislead the public of New Zealand, and it does not enable speculators to get away without paying tax, and it does not, as the last member said, create a situation which is unfair to New Zealanders. And the real message from that last member is that he is firmly in the camp of having a capital gains tax. He wants a full-blown capital gains tax. That's what that last member said in his speech. That's what you can take out of it. And then your New Zealand First Party can laugh, but they actually agree with that. And so, New Zealanders, beware. The Labour Party still wants a capital gains tax. Their finance spokesperson came into this House today and said he wanted a capital gains tax. That's what he said in his speech. And New Zealanders, beware of that, because that is the true message of what he said in that last speech. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call Stuart Nash.
Mr. Speaker,